Stargate SG-1 started out as an unlikely television series. It spun off from the 1994 feature film directed by Roland Emmerich, but without any involvement from the original creators. But under the guidance of co-creators Jonathan Glassner and Brad Wright, and an exceptional cast and crew, the series helped to create a new renaissance in science fiction on cable. SG-1 ran for 214 episodes and spawned 2 spin-off shows so far, plus a short-lived animated series and a pair of DVD movies, far exceeding the ambitions of the original filmmakers. For more than a decade, Stargate was the cornerstone of the Vancouver television industry. And let's be honest, after it jumped networks in 2002, Stargate helped to put the Sci-Fi Channel on the map as a top 10 cable channel. Now, more than 25 years after the show's premiere, let's look back on the history that made Stargate SG-1 one of the greats of science fiction, how it weathered challenges over 10 years in production, and why its legacy continues to endure. In the mid-1990s, Showtime was trying something new. To attract subscribers to the premium cable service, Showtime was investing in its own original content, dramas and adult comedies, along with a healthy dose of mature science fiction. The broadcast networks were trying out shows like Earth 2 and Space Above and Beyond. These would be short-lived, but in the 90s, science fiction and fantasy was thriving in the realm of syndication. Local TV affiliates that aired shows like Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Babylon 5, Hercules, and Earth Final Conflict. Syndicated shows could air at any hour of the day, but they garnered millions of viewers. On basic cable, the Sci-Fi Channel was also beginning to experiment with original series, like Welcome to Paradox. It was also importing shows from other parts of the world, such as Lex, which had already been produced and aired in other countries but would be new to US audiences. But it would still be a few years before the channel really found its groove with the likes of Sliders, picked up in 1998 after Fox canceled it, and in 1999, Farscape. Showtime turned to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer to help fill the new schedule, signing a multi-show deal with the historic studio's television arm. In 1994, MGM had hired John Symes away from Paramount to rebuild its fledgling TV division, and Showtime was to be the focus of MGM Television's output. Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin's Stargate was a surprise hit at the 1994 box office. It was a somewhat quirky mix of science fiction, militarism, and ancient Egyptian mythology. Kurt Russell's Colonel Jack O'Neill was the square-jawed action hero, while James Spader brought a sense of wonder as archaeologist Dr. Daniel Jackson. The lead villain of the piece was the alien sun god Ra, played by Jay Davidson. The movie was produced with independent financing from partners around the world, and MGM signed on to distribute the film to theaters. But as Devlin tells it, at the 11th hour, Stargate's investors got cold feet. Fearing they had a flop on their hands, they sold off the rights to MGM. A steal at just $5 million. Stargate premiered in theaters in October of 1994, an off month for spectacle science fiction, and set a record for an October theatrical release. The movie grossed nearly $200 million worldwide, vindicating the filmmaker's vision. Emmerich and Devlin followed this success with 1996's Independence Day, which was an even bigger hit. The pair approached executives at MGM about their desire to return to Stargate and make it into a trilogy. Each sequel film would expand the mythology, exploring other ancient Earth cultures and using the other chevrons on the Stargate to dial up new worlds. But by now, MGM had already set its sights on a television show. Jonathan Glassner and Brad Wright were both working for MGM on another sci-fi show, The Outer Limits, which was shooting at the Bridge Studios in Vancouver, British Columbia. Wright recalls walking out of the movie theater in 1994, having just seen Stargate, and thinking how much better the concept would work as a weekly television series. After all, with 39 symbols on the gate, there were thousands of permutations for gate addresses, and each one of them could be a new adventure. Glassner, meanwhile, had been making plans to return home to California. But he was also interested in Stargate, and he knew that his bosses at MGM had recently acquired the rights. To keep Glassner working at Bridge Studios, John Symes offered him Stargate, if he would executive produce the show with Wright. Glassner said yes, and he would stay in Canada for another 3 years. This was a busy but incredibly fruitful time. Glassner and Wright began work on a pilot script. In the coming months, they pulled double duty, launching their new show while also continuing work on The Outer Limits. Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich's dream of a Stargate feature film trilogy was over. They refused an offer from MGM to come on board the TV series as consultants. Now in the hands of a new creative team, Stargate was going to become something very different. MGM Television provided the backbone to a new Friday night block of cutting-edge science fiction on Showtime. The Outer Limits had premiered in 1995, reviving the iconic 1960s anthology to great success. The next year, MGM and Showtime premiered Poltergeist: The Legacy, another movie adaptation. A Western anthology, Dead Man's Gun, bowed in 1997. The studio had signed a multi-series deal with Showtime, and Stargate was now primed to take the next slot. Wright and Glassner made a successful pitch, and in the fall of 1996 they handed in an imaginative script that brought back characters from the movie, introduced new team members, and began to explore the truth about Ra's race. The series would reveal that the aliens, now called the Goa'uld, were not extinct, but a thriving civilization that enslaved countless worlds throughout the galaxy. To take over the lead role of Jack O'Neill, now with 2 L's, producers cast popular television actor Richard Dean Anderson. After 7 seasons of MacGyver, Anderson was a household name. In 1996, he was coming off the short-lived UPN series Legend. He initially resisted, until producers assured him that he wouldn't have to play the role with the same grim seriousness Russell had in the movie. Anderson would be able to make the role his own, bringing his signature wit and humor to the SG-1 team. Taking over the role of Daniel Jackson was 26-year-old Canadian actor Michael Shanks. He initially impressed the producers by channeling Spader's portrayal, and early on, even some viewers didn't realize he was a different actor. New characters rounded out the team, with Amanda Tapping cast as Captain Samantha Carter and Christopher Judge as the alien warrior Teal'c. Alexis Cruz was also asked to reprise his role as the Abydonian Skara, but turned down a full-time part and opted to be a recurring guest star in the series. The key to the new show was not only the alien portal that would be open to a new planet every week, it was also the characters. For Wright and Glassner, it was basic to the show's DNA that these were contemporary men and women viewers could relate to, not some idealized future like Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek. It wasn't larger-than-life heroes going through that Stargate. It was us. The stakes were high because everything they discovered on the other side would be brand new to them, just as it was to the audience. In its early years, SG-1 would have to solve problems by good old-fashioned ingenuity, cleverness, and heart, instead of by having a more powerful ship than the enemy. In the show's first season, the US Air Force signed on to consult for the series, aiding in its realism. They were so proud of how the show depicted the armed forces that they helped bring in 2 Air Force Chiefs of Staff for cameo appearances. In 2004, the Air Force invited Richard Dean Anderson to a special event in Washington, D.C. to receive an award as Honorary Brigadier General, recognizing the show's positive portrayal of the Air Force. As the first season ramped up production, Anderson and his partner Michael Greenberg were able to hire much of the crew from their days on MacGyver. That included one of that show's stunt performers, who had worked as a stunt double for MacGyver co-star Dana Elcar. His name was Don S. Davis, and he would join Stargate's regular cast as Major General George Hammond. Finally, a series of supporting actors would fill out the operations at Stargate Command. Gary Jones' technician appeared in the very first episode, and Terrell Rothery's Dr. Fraser would be introduced in episode 4. Sergeant Seiler ended up in peril so often because actor Dan Shea was the show's stunt coordinator, as well as doubling for Anderson himself. The pilot script underwent numerous changes before filming commenced in February of 1997. This included changing the name and rank of Samantha Carter, who was originally Lieutenant Clayman, as well as the name of the villain Apep, who became Apophis. Producers also cut a prisoner brawl on Teal'c's homeworld of Chulak and simplified the Stargate's new Iris Shield. The 2-hour pilot had what was an ambitious budget at the time at $6 million. Stargate SG-1 premiered on Showtime on July 27, 1997, with the movie event Children of the Gods. It was a hit with audiences, and Stargate's fandom was born anew. While of course the feature film held a special place in our hearts, now Jack O'Neill was very much Richard Dean Anderson, and Daniel Jackson was Michael Shanks. New episodes rolled out each Friday night, introducing new villains and allies, and the young SG-1 team grew to become a family. Now Stargate wasn't Stargate without Sam, Teal'c, General Hammond, and others. Because Showtime was brand new to original scripted programming, the network had made an initial order of 2 full seasons, a total of 44 episodes guaranteed before cameras started rolling. This gave the cast and crew job security, and the writers an unusual amount of freedom to develop the characters and plot out the narrative. But before the show premiered, Showtime ordered 2 more seasons. The cast and crew of Stargate would have steady jobs for at least 4 years. What followed for Showtime was a total of 5 seasons of amazing science fiction storytelling, an ancient meeting hall in the torment of Tantalus, and an alternate universe in There But For the Grace of God, a black hole in A Matter of Time, and an encounter with the mysterious Asgard in The Fifth Race, an uneasy truce with the System Lords in Fair Game, an Asgard ship infested with replicators in Nemesis, and a time loop conundrum in Window of Opportunity. Stargate also went out internationally, becoming a hit in its home country of Canada, as well as the United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, France, Australia, New Zealand, and beyond. In the fall of 1998, even more viewers discovered the show when it made its debut in the US syndication market. Showtime's license was non-exclusive, giving MGM the ability to resell the show to stations around the country 1 year after the episodes aired on cable. Then, after 5 seasons, Showtime decided it had had enough. In 2002, the cable service was pivoting toward darker and more adult shows like Jeremiah and Odyssey 5. Stargate SG-1 was cancelled. Then, things got really interesting. Charlie Cohen was an executive vice president at MGM, and he was also a big fan of Stargate SG-1. After 5 successful seasons and more than 100 episodes, he knew that this cast and crew had plenty of gas left in the tank. Glassner had departed the series after 3 seasons. Former story editor Robert C. Cooper was elevated to executive producer, and in season 4, the production hired new staff writers in Joseph Malazzi and Paul Mully. As the show's 5-year run was drawing to a close, Wright and Cooper turned their attention to developing their own feature film for the SG-1 team, as well as a potential spin-off series. But at MGM, Cohen was determined to find SG-1 a new home. He negotiated the series' move from Showtime to the Sci-Fi Channel to give Stargate 1 final year. As a basic cable channel, Sci-Fi came already included with most people's cable package. The result was that SG-1, which had been reserved for paying audiences and syndication repeats delayed by more than a year, suddenly became available to a much larger audience. Not that Sci-Fi Channel already had that audience, mind you. Founded in 1992, Sci-Fi was making do with off-network reruns of classic shows and horror movies. In the years before DVDs and streaming, this was pretty much the only way to watch older content. By 2002, Sci-Fi had seen some modest success with originals like Sliders, Farscape, and First Wave, an early acquisition from Canada's Space Channel. But in the ratings race, the channel was pretty far down the cable rankings. Stargate SG-1 would change that. The show's arrival on Sci-Fi in 2002 began in the form of a daily strip of its first few seasons, while Season 5 was still wrapping up its run on Showtime. These older episodes aired late in the afternoon or early evening, Monday through Friday, with an occasional weekend marathon, enabling newcomers to catch up with the story in just a few months. Not everyone made the trip over from Showtime, however. After 5 seasons as the fan favorite Dr. Daniel Jackson, Shanks decided not to return. He believed that his character was underutilized and had largely run his course, and as an actor, he was ready to try new things. Out of courtesy to the Showtime audience, the writers decided not to end the 5th season on a cliffhanger, but they did write Shanks out in the tear-jerking penultimate episode, Meridian. The episode also introduced Daniel's eventual replacement on the team. Corin Nemec was cast as Jonas Quinn, a brilliant and enthusiastic alien from the planet Langara. When his people, the Colonans, attempt to scapegoat Daniel for a near-catastrophic lab accident, Jonas defects to Earth with the precious mineral Nequadria. At the moment of his death, Daniel ascended to a higher plane of existence, which allowed the writers to bring him back for guest appearances. There was no bad blood with Shanks, who returned for multiple guest spots, in addition to continuing to voice the Asgard Thor. In fact, even after leaving the show, he appeared in one capacity or another for a third of the new season. Stargate's 6th season debuted in June of 2002, pulling in around 1.8 million viewers. Its audience grew substantially on basic cable, and thanks to MGM's global distribution strategy, the show was now going out to more than 120 countries. With a new and growing audience on Sci-Fi, the show stretched its creative legs in Season 6. Along with a new team member, the writers introduced Earth's first interstellar ship, the Prometheus. The replicators evolved into an even deadlier form. The identity of the Ancients was finally revealed, and Anubis, introduced the previous year through whispers and shadows, stepped into the foreground as the show's new main antagonist. Jonas certainly won over his own loyal fanbase. Newcomers who had started watching SG-1 on the Sci-Fi Channel may have been especially partial to his character, but there was no shortage of fan controversy at the time. Michael Shanks supporters petitioned the producers and the network to bring back his character, and at times Corin Nemec bore the brunt of some pretty nasty hate mail. Meanwhile, with a new hit series of its very own, Sci-Fi was reaping an avalanche of new viewers. Stargate SG-1 made the Sci-Fi Channel a top 10 cable network. After Stargate moved over from Showtime, the channel regularly began ranking in the weekly ratings figures. In 2009, Sci-Fi would rebrand, and Sci-Fi, as it exists today, owes a great deal to the Stargate team. In addition to new weekly episodes, daily airings of SG-1 did wonders for the channel. The show was a perfect fit for its target audience. Action and adventure, humor, interesting characters and exciting cliffhangers, and family-friendly to boot. When the show's 6th season premiered as a Sci-Fi original, everyone involved, from the network to MGM to the Vancouver production crew, saw that they had a big hit on their hands. Those Monday through Friday reruns proved to be a perfect jumping-on point for viewers, who would then tune in with great anticipation for a brand new episode on Friday nights. viewers could catch up on plot points quickly, and longtime fans had a way to revisit favorite episodes nearly every day of the week. The network's number crunchers also discovered that the ratings for the daytime reruns did better when new episodes were also airing at the end of the week. They were seeing ratings at 5 p.m. and 6 p.m. that matched or exceeded what the network used to get in primetime. And so the decision was easy. Instead of season 6 being the show's swan song, Sci-Fi renewed it again. But going for another year would bring more changes behind the scenes of Stargate. Corin Nemec knocked it out of the park during his year on the cast, with both the actor and his character filling some very big shoes. Jonas was interesting and original, not a clone of Dr. Jackson, though scripts sometimes depended on his photographic memory of Daniel's notes. Jonas was a man trying to do right for his people, who were too short-sighted to see their place in a larger galaxy. Over time, he earned the respect of Colonel O'Neill and the viewers. But with a 7th season on the horizon, the show's producers extended an olive branch to Michael Shanks. He agreed to return to the series full-time, which meant that Jonas was to be written out. There were budget considerations, and shows tend to get more expensive year after year, largely due to salaries. But from the vantage point of the writers, there just wasn't room on the team for 2 characters who served essentially the same story function. In Season 7, Stargate was riding high, with great ratings, new licensed merchandise including novels, comics, and toys, and a spin-off in the works. The franchise also enjoyed more widespread name recognition, which included the show's first appearance on the cover of TV Guide, which featured Anderson and Shanks with the headline, "Forget Trek, Stargate SG-1 is now Sci-Fi's biggest hit." With plans in the works to take SG-1 to the big screen and set up that spin-off, Sci-Fi Channel surprised the crew by renewing it again. Brad Wright and Robert Cooper's story for the feature film became the brilliant 2-parter Lost City, ending the 7th season with a massive confrontation with Anubis. The lost city of Atlantis would also be moved from Antarctica to another galaxy, so that SG-1 and its new spin-off could run at the same time. As Stargate SG-1 entered its 8th season, each week it would air alongside Stargate Atlantis. The network's Sci-Fi Friday lineup made for a golden age of science fiction television, with 2 hours of Stargate followed by the new hit and critical darling Battlestar Galactica. This success came, of course, with new challenges behind the scenes. A full season order was scaled back from 22 episodes to 20, but producing 40 hours of television between the 2 shows took a toll. In order to spend more time at home in California with his young daughter, series lead Richard Dean Anderson had been gradually stepping down his role since the 6th season. Now, the decision to promote Jack O'Neill to Brigadier General and put him in command of the base allowed the writers to maximize the limited shooting days he had available during the 2004 production year. The change also filled in the gap left by the great Don Davis, who for health reasons was reducing his own workload. With Jack no longer on the SGC's Advanced Field Unit, Season 8 would have more Earth-based stories, and more of Sam, Daniel, and Teal'c running around and getting into trouble without General O'Neill. As the fishing line hit the pond next to Jack's cabin at the end of the season, twice, Anderson officially retired from the show. But the ratings were still going strong, and Sci-Fi wanted a 9th season. The Friday night block of original shows was a huge success, and clearly 2 Stargate shows airing in tandem did better than just one. It also allowed MGM to amortize much of the production costs. The show would go on, but it meant even bigger changes in order to make it happen. Perhaps the most impressive feat accomplished in the final years of Stargate SG-1's 10-season run was not how the show successfully replaced original cast members, or how the writers introduced a brand new villain following the defeat of the Goa'uld. Most impressive was the fact that the production team accomplished all of this while also making another show. SG-1 and Atlantis were shot on adjoining sound stages at the Bridge Studios, one on Stage 5 and the other next door on Stage 6. That meant conceiving, writing, filming, and producing 40 hours of television every year. Rather than staffing up with a second show's worth of writers, directors, prop and makeup artists, and more, MGM optimized costs by having the two shows share almost everything. The end of SG-1's main storylines, and the departure of its lead actor, presented an array of issues for the upcoming 9th season. When the writers assembled at the end of 2004, they faced the task of building something that was largely new, while still keeping the DNA of the show fans loved. Now, there was a serious conversation between the producers, the studio, and the network that perhaps it was time to rebrand the long-running series. Instead of Season 9 of Stargate SG-1, they considered launching the first season of a new show titled Stargate Command. The new spin-off would also be set at the SGC and utilize most of the same cast and crew, but mark a fresh starting point for the audience. New viewers wary of jumping on in a show's 9th year might find Season 1 more appealing. Contracts could also be renegotiated in ways that might give the show a longer lifespan, from salaries and residuals to a little-known clause that gave the network the right to refuse to allow Stargate SG-1 to one day move to a new network. More on that in a moment. In the end, the decision was made that it was better to keep the Stargate SG-1 brand. For what it's worth, one result of this decision is that the show would enter the Guinness Book of World Records early in its 10th season, surpassing The X-Files as the longest-running science fiction series produced in North America. To move the series forward into its 9th year, Farscape star Ben Browder joined the cast as Lieutenant Colonel Cameron Mitchell. Veteran actor Beau Bridges took over the SGC as General Hank Landry. But replacing Richard Dean Anderson was just the first task. Actress Amanda Tapping also stepped away for maternity leave during the first several weeks of filming. Producers looked to Claudia Black, who had played thief and con artist Vala in one episode the previous year. Black was hired on for a 6-episode arc to start the new season. Then there was the story. Both the Goa'uld and the Replicators had been defeated, now with a fleet of Asgard-enhanced ships, a weapons platform in Antarctica to defend the planet, and an outpost in the Pegasus Galaxy. Earth's Stargate program had more or less accomplished all of its objectives. The series needed a new antagonist that would pose a real threat and set our heroes back on their heels. The Ori, and more immediately their human followers, were the creation of Robert Cooper, who had joined the show as a story editor in Season 1 and worked his way up through the ranks to become showrunner. SG-1 co-creator Brad Wright was devoting more of his time to the second season of Stargate Atlantis. Like the Goa'uld, the Ori were nothing more than an advanced alien race posing as gods in order to enslave human cultures. But very much unlike the Goa'uld, as ascended beings, the Ori possessed not only advanced technology, but powers that really did appear to be godlike. The Ori could control the weather, turn planets into black holes, imbue their emissaries with superhuman abilities, bring disease, and then instantly cure it. It became exponentially more difficult for the team to convince primitive worlds that the Ori did not deserve their worship. Season 9 debuted in the summer of 2005, and while the show continued to draw solid viewership on Sci-Fi, it was clear that the ratings had peaked. It's not clear how much of this was due to Anderson's departure, or a new story arc, or the natural aging that is the fate of all hit television shows. In Season 10, Claudia Black returned to the show as a full-time member of the cast, and Stargate celebrated its 200th episode. The bonkers comedic hour was broadcast in August of 2006, with a self-effacing send-up not only of SG-1, but a host of genre programs and films. But on the night that the cast and crew gathered at a production party to celebrate the 200th episode, word came down from the network. The series had been cancelled. In 2006, the Sci-Fi Channel was about to pivot in its creative strategy. It shared a parent company and a network president with USA Network, which was even more successful thanks to programming for a more general audience. Sci-Fi Channel would follow its sister network in creating scripted programming that tried to reach that wider audience, but with a genre twist. Hoping to spur further growth, Sci-Fi began a shift from traditional science fiction concepts like aliens and space travel to contemporary shows set on Earth, written with humor and just enough of a supernatural twist to keep the stories inside the genre. The first of these was Eureka, set in a fictional small town where the sheriff has to deal with the antics of the local advanced research facility. Eureka had premiered on Sci-Fi just weeks earlier, in July of 2006, drawing a record-breaking audience of more than 4 million viewers. This, not outer space drama or alien invasions, was going to be the future of the cable network. Later editions like Warehouse 13, Haven, and others had smaller effects budgets, and the network believed that they would appeal to more viewers than traditional science fiction did, because their characters were less fantastical and more relatable. But the last handful of episodes of SG-1 were still in production, giving the writers a chance to take the Ori story as far as they could, and to give the show a fitting send-off, with the emotional finale unending. They also took a few shots at Sci-Fi on their way out, in the form of guest star Fred Willard's exchange with Carter in the episode Family Ties.
But the truth is, the Stargate program just doesn't get the support it used to from the people in charge.
Why not?
Eureka! 1 down, 12 to go.
That's too bad, because after all your Stargate program has accomplished for this network of planets, I would think the decision makers would show it the respect it deserves.
Yeah.
Since the 5th season of Stargate SG-1, the show's writers had been working under the belief that each new season was probably going to be the show's last. They wrote several season enders that could serve as a series finale, and still wanted to follow through on those plans to take SG-1 to the big screen. But with a new cast and a new lease on life, things were different in Season 10. Producers expected that the show would continue on. That made the cancellation particularly ironic. But if Stargate could be saved from cancellation once by moving to another network, why not try again? MGM and the show's producers certainly tried. With the discovery of Merlin's weapon and the ascension of Adria, the Ori storyline was really just getting started, and the powers that be supported a fan campaign to try and save the show. They pitched the show to other potential partners, eventually landing on Apple as a potential home for an 11th season. It was now 2007, still a few years before the proliferation of streaming television on demand, and Apple was a major player in the digital content sphere. Its iTunes service had expanded from retail music hub to now also selling downloadable TV and film content, and they had eyes on competing with Netflix by creating their own original programming, in order to one day support the launch of a subscription platform. Apple TV Plus was still a decade away, but for a while the talks with MGM were serious. Stargate SG-1 Season 11 might have been a cornerstone program for Apple's burgeoning online ambitions. Ultimately, the party that rescued SG-1 from cancellation the first time was the same one that delivered the final blow. This was thanks to a small but unavoidable clause in the studio's contract with Sci-Fi. It essentially gave the network a veto. MGM could only take the series to another outlet if Sci-Fi gave its blessing. And in 2007, it didn't. The channel was still airing Stargate Atlantis, with talks of a second spin-off down the road. Executives probably didn't like the idea of the Stargate franchise not being synonymous with the Sci-Fi Channel. Ironically, had they relaunched the show as Stargate Command in 2005, the new contract might have been more favorable to these 11th hour efforts to save the series. With the rescue attempt failed, MGM and the producers turned to a new plan for the SG-1 team, one that also satisfied Wright and Cooper's years-long desire to make movies. SG-1 would continue in the form of original direct-to-DVD films. This gave the studio complete autonomy over content and distribution, although it also had to front the entire production cost. Movies also gave producers the chance to tell bigger stories with more money and a larger format. With Atlantis beginning production on its 4th season, MGM greenlit 2 SG-1 movies to film at the Bridge Studios in 2007. This allowed the SG-1 sets to stay up and the cast and crew to roll straight into the new projects. The first film debuted in 2008 and did what the 11th season was meant to do: wrap up the Ori story arc. Stargate: The Arc of Truth was written and directed by Robert C. Cooper, and showcased what the team could do with more time, more money, and a larger canvas. This was followed later that year by Stargate Continuum, a standalone time travel romp written by Brad Wright and directed by longtime franchise director Martin Wood. Continuum also brought the unique opportunity to film north of the Arctic Circle, thanks to Barry Campbell, head of operations at the Navy's Arctic Submarine Laboratory, and also a big Stargate fan. The 2 films were financially successful, but only moderately so. For most of the decade, the DVD market had been a cash cow for studios, as millions of customers spent money to build home media libraries of favorite films and television series. But by 2008, those sales were slowing, and the market began its transition to digital downloads, and ultimately to streaming. Sales of the Stargate movies were good enough for MGM to give the go-ahead for a 3rd film, Stargate Revolution. But while Brad Wright drew up plans for Jack O'Neill's big return and the disclosure of the Stargate program to the public, MGM hit the brakes. There just wasn't any way to make the numbers work. Home media sales were getting softer by the month. As time passed, it became apparent that MGM was staring down the barrel of its own financial collapse. The studio declared bankruptcy in 2010. After being modified and reused for the 2009 premiere of Stargate Universe, the show's second spin-off, the Stage 5 set was finally struck. The 3rd SG-1 film would never be made. It was the end of the road for one of science fiction's biggest hits. After Stargate SG-1, the franchise continued onward with 2 more years of Stargate Atlantis, then 2 years of Stargate Universe. It finally reached an endpoint in May of 2011, when SGU went off the air with its final episode. MGM had gone through bankruptcy and been handed over to new management, and Sci-Fi Channel, also under new leadership, was still pivoting away from hard science fiction programming. There wasn't anywhere for Stargate to go, and there wasn't anyone left inside the studio to fight for it. Richard Dean Anderson has since been enjoying semi-retirement, with occasional appearances on television and more frequent visits to fan conventions. Michael Shanks went on to star in his own series, the Canadian medical drama Saving Hope, alongside Smallville actress and one-time SG-1 guest star Erica Durance. Amanda Tapping stayed with the franchise for 1 more year, moving over to the regular cast of Stargate Atlantis as Colonel Carter took command of the expedition. When she left the show, Tapping took on duties as both executive producer and star of the fantasy series Sanctuary, which aired for 4 seasons. Christopher Judge went on to a series of film and television appearances, including a part in Christopher Nolan's 2012 Batman sequel, The Dark Knight Rises. But his real success came when his agent convinced him to audition for the lead role in a video game, Santa Monica Studios' 2018 reboot of God of War. The role of Kratos introduced Judge to a brand new audience, winning him numerous awards. Don S. Davis passed away of a sudden heart attack in 2008, at the age of 65. The Stargate team honored their friend by naming Earth's newest ship after his character. Samantha Carter would take command of the USS George Hammond. From its start on Showtime in 1997 to its move into syndication and countries around the world, to new life on basic cable and in the DVD market, Stargate SG-1's influence on its era is hard to overestimate. It helped Showtime succeed in its venture into original programming. It made Sci-Fi a top 10 cable channel, paving the way for other shows and miniseries that came after it. And it provided thousands of jobs to men and women throughout the Vancouver film industry, spawning a franchise that reigned over the Bridge Studios for 14 years. Stargate was also a training ground for many aspiring writers, directors, and producers. After making her directorial debut in the 7th season, Amanda Tapping went on to become a prolific television director. Producers Joseph Malazzi and Paul Mully went on to create the hit series Dark Matter for Sci-Fi, while Wright himself added to his prolific career in science fiction with the Netflix original series Travelers. Martin Garrow went from 5 years on Atlantis to creating shows like The LA Complex and Blindspot, and executive producing the 2022 reboot of Quantum Leap. And, in an ironic twist, more than 25 years after Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich lost the rights to Stargate, Devlin teamed up with SG-1 co-creator Jonathan Glassner on a new series of their own, the deep space survival drama The Ark. All things considered, Stargate SG-1 wasn't just great television. It's a show that helped to shape the landscape of science fiction for more than a decade. It's a show that made a difference, and a show that really matters to millions of fans around the world. Indeed.
Indeed. Indeed. Indeed. Indeed. Indeed. Indeed. Indeed. Indeed. Indeed. Indeed. Indeed.
Indeed.
Indeed. Indeed.
Thank you for watching this short history of Stargate SG-1. There's much more to the story, which we plan to cover in a series of future videos. To explore more from this fantastic universe, visit us at gateworld.net. Our website launched all the way back in 1999, and it's not only a companion to the shows and their fictional universe, but a real-time chronicle of their production history. What are your memories of SG-1? Post them in the comments below, and give the video a like to help support the channel. Next up, check out this video about the Stargate producers' attempts to save SG-1 for an 11th season.